House. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here today. And it's a pleasure to introduce Cameron Awkward Rich, too. I just wanted to say, please take this with you, too. This is our schedule of Lit House events. So there may be some stuff added to the website and stuff in English, too. So stay tuned for those things. I think door and there is. Open. And here's a room where everything you've lost is washed ashore. Cameron Awkward Rich begins his poem, All My Friends Are Sad and Bright. In Awkward Rich's work, language is not just a way of conjuring physical space, and not just a way of opening the world, but a way of recovering everything you've lost. If poetry reimagines the world, then here's a poet who imagines the moment, quote, you go around talking to the trees and for just a moment, they turn to face you. The world Cameron Awkward Rich rebuilds is one that wants to recover us as well. Cameron Awkward Rich is the author of 2 books of poems. The first, Sympathetic Little Monster, appeared from Ricochet Editions in 2016, and it was a finalist for both the Firecracker Award and the Lambda Literary Award. His book, Dispatch, this one here, which is on sale after the reading as well, won the Lexi Rudnitsky Editor's Choice Award and was published by Persea Books in 2019. About Dispatch, The New Yorker, you know that magazine, The New Yorker, just a little, reviews everything that's ever published. It's really special to be reviewed in The New Yorker. Anyway, they write that Awkward Rich's terse yet beguiling lyric articulates what it is to inhabit a particular body at a particular time in history and, in the shadow of violence, to seek or resist openness. Also a scholar of trans theory and expressive culture in the United States, Awkward Rich earned his PhD from Stanford University's program in modern thought and literature. His more critical writing can be found in Signs, Trans Studies Quarterly, American Quarterly, and elsewhere. And it has been supported by fellowships from Duke University's program in Feminist, Gender, and Sexuality Studies and the American Council of Learned Studies. His book, The Terrible We, Thinking with Trans Maladjustment, this book, was published by Duke University Press in 2022. Presently, he is an associate professor in the Department of Women, Gender, Sexuality Studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. His creative work has been supported by fellowships from Cave Canem, the Watering Hole, and the Lannan Foundation. If it's true what they say, Dr. Awkward Rich says in his poem, My Life Closed Twice, that poetry is written with the knowledge of and against death, that it is a beacon, a bulwark, then love, I confess I have been no poet. And here I have to respectfully dissent. Since he writes a poetry that is for me not just beacon and bulwark, but a fortress for feeling and a making of space for those who don't always easily fit into spaces. Bulwark from the Middle High German for the process of working a tree into a means of security defense. This is the world, Awkward Rich writes in another poem. With me in it, the speaker insists. It is beautiful. It is. Please join me in welcoming Cameron Awkward Rich to Washington Post.
Hi, everyone. Hello. It's sort of mortifying to have to live up to one's own biography. So I'm not really going to try very hard to do that. Instead, I'm just going to read some poems, but thank you, James, for that really beautiful, introduction. Yes, I'm going to read some poems. I'm going to try not to banter too much, because that's when things kind of go off the rails and get a little bit weird. And also, I know that some of you here have read Dispatch in your classes, but I'm mostly going to read some poems that are not exactly new. Like, some of them exist in the world, but they don't exist in a book yet. So I'm going to read some new stuff. And I have a PowerPoint for one of them, which we'll see how that works. Cool. And I think that the last thing I'll say before I just like sort of read is I'll say that I am an intense person, and I think that poetry is where my intensity lives, not in my kind of everyday social interactions. And so what that means is that I'm often writing about, there we go. I think that what that means is that I'm often writing about sex and violence and sexual violence. And so I invite you always to, like, if you don't want to hang out with my little feelings, to leave. I won't be offended. But just know that that is sort of what we're up to here. Okay, so this first poem is maybe the second poem in a new book. Yeah, I won't give any preamble. I'll say it's called Long Distance. It's called something nearly unbearable, the room on your computer, inside of which the men shine with sweat and shea. They, the men, are passing another between them like a lit joint, though they the burning paper, and he the lips. Plainly, we're in your bed watching porn, though it's purely academic, everyone merely a student of pleasure. Except for the boy, the wet coin, who by now has opened his second toothless mouth, swallowing from both ends, his eyes wide, and then he's gone, vanished into the body's thicket, and so the men, though never touching, do. All four of us, one wooded quiet, carrying his cry. We take a screenshot to remember this. What are we trying to understand? In the morning, I'll fly home. It will be months and months until I am again marked with your scent. I'd given up, you know, resigned myself to the idea of desire. The body, my body, a locked door. Love, if that is your name, I'm a practiced hand, and good at waiting. And meanwhile, the sugar maples, miles of them, flushed and damp between us. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It isn't that I was a boy, moving darkly through the years of my girlhood, still mute kernel of future tense scarred by language, memory, form, etc. It isn't that. On the phone, my father tells me he thinks of me as someone daring, someone who rushes headfirst into situations that promise pleasure, sure, a portion of it, but mostly pain, inevitable as pain is inevitable. I think you laugh at this description, because you know me now, a me who startles from his skin if you so much as walk unannounced into the room. You were always interested in your own injury, my father's saying, rather than afraid of it. Do you remember that morning when, after sex, you did that thing lovers sometimes do in the movies? You moved across my body like a gardener, stopping to identify the foliage, what was roses, what weeds. There was all the obvious stuff, the scars like anchors on my chest, the tattoos. But the rest of it, anyway, I lied. I was afraid to tell you how little I cared for my life, for no reason, other than that it was and will interminably be mine. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And we were, of course, two girls trying, despite the world, to love each other. Though love, like anything, can curdle, make you sick. I was sick of love that night, years after we lay trembling on the floor of a room where neither of us lived, where I touched her for the first time. Touched her not enough to say I knew her then, only that I would eventually learn to make her soften in the heat. It's true. I admit it. I overused the body. My body, her body, the slick light spilling from the hall. It doesn't matter what happens to the body dizzy in the grass, the body tonguing salt, the body wicked like a shadow untethered from the self. I'm not innocent. I came running when she called. I climbed the steps to the purple door. I walked right in to admire the old fantasy, our fantasy in which I was her girl again, and this was our house, our kitchen table, our clean bed. It was like a dream to have the world, the ordinary world, for once. So yes, I let her have it. And meanwhile, the years between us washed to gray, the body blackened like a stone beneath her, and it had, therefore, always been this way. Okay. I'm gonna read a different kind of thing. One of the things that happens in this book is that I'm often writing in relationship to images and other artwork. And this one is sort of an acrostic poem about this statue, which you can't really see because both I've made it really hard to see by changing the color, but also because of the light. But this is a statue by the sculptor Elizabeth Catlett, and it's written after the novel by Ralph Ellison, Invisible Man. And this is a kind of a weirder poem. The poem is called Trans Study, Invisible Man, 2003. And it begins with an epigraph. To be unaware of one's form is to live a death. I myself, after existing some 20 years, did not become alive until I discovered my invisibility. Ralph Ellison. At first, there is a general darkness. Then, after many hours, a shape in the darkness, a bright hole through which the world is given. I am right now turning in the hole against the general dark. I am looking for a pattern I might later call my life, moments strung like train cars rattling the underground. Anything could have happened. Damp air, rosy midnight, faces whitened, grin, fluorescent lit, boy, dark and curled as a comma in the spill from your fountain of naming what you do and do not see. The boy I, who's pressing my face to the cold glass, watching the shadows move like him across the surface of the earth. Do I have to say it, what I have been? Anything you roll your windows down to call me on a quiet night in a quiet town, snow drifting on a street light, giving form to what is otherwise a vague brushing on the skin. I have been the kindling of that dark, a black dog dyke mute in the corner, monkey muse stud with a huge fertile water, dead weight to carry to the finish line. I have been the finish line, the threshold vestibule that marks the win that was not mine, but me, the kill, the trophy, boy in the looking glass, girl in the wishing well, gentle buck, etc. Yes, you named my, and I became. Inside I saw the city move, a shape in the water. You said, and I was, a mirror, darkly. No substance is your first mistake. No form, the second. The common you assume no mind, but there is a mind, turning like no machine, little cat patient in her den. No, the mind is the hole she carves into the solid world. Watch what passes through. A hole is, not the absence of form. It is where the forms begin. In daylight, branches cut across, blue opening, untamed sky. I am what you cannot touch. All right, how are we? How are we so far? Are we okay? Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna read something long, and it's not exactly a poem. I don't know what it is. I think it's kind of an essay. I think it's kind of a poem. But the thing to know about it is that, well, there are two things. The first thing is that it is a series of kind of letters to the 20th century poet, priest, lawyer, all around kind of overactive social justice activist Pauli Murray, who I became obsessed with them in the year 2020. I think because I turned 30 and started looking around for fathers, as one does. So yes, this is about Pauli Murray. And also the thing to know about it is that it's a palinode, which means that it is a poem that is sort of retracting or renouncing something from a previous poem. Although in this case, the retraction is of an essay that the retraction is of an essay of mine that I wrote about Pauli. Yeah, and there's a lot of images, which are not necessarily important, but I think they set the mood. So, okay. It begins with two epigraphs. The proximities of the archive disperse the feeling of otherwise being consumed by the present and its many emergencies. Jules Dale Peterson. Reading only with and for transsexuals, I read for my life. J. Prosser. Palinode. Dear Polly, I've been trying to write about you for some years now and have not been able. Well, other people might say I have been. I've given talks. There's an essay under contract. But I haven't been able yet to say what I mean. Lately, each thing I do is a form of the epistolary. Apostrophe, some particular impossible you. The problem is, of course, one of audience, address. I can't have a single thought. From what I can tell, you didn't have that problem. You were, I think, able to hold something like a nation in your head. Still, it must have eventually driven you mad, from scene to scene, institution to institution, looking for felicitous language, precise vocabulary, syntax, or making clear what to you was always clear, that you were alive. Anyway, I've been having trouble lately. The sentences either do not come or lie flat or say only what is obvious to say. Life hangs beneath the question. Dear Polly, am I right to say that for you, the poet was at best a kind of prophet? Not a fortune teller, but in the biblical tradition, someone who could sense the future looming in the present, who issues the warning, if we do not change our course, we will be and thus are already doomed. Dear Polly, in interviews, you say that writing was what enabled you to bear your life beneath the question. It was what you did, that is, when no other action was possible, a little valve when the pressure built. Anger otherwise would kill you. When asked at 67, at the edge of your fourth, fifth career, if you would ever let yourself rest, you said, in short, I'd be dead if I did. In the essay, the one under contract, the one I am already ashamed of, I make arguments, or try to. First, I argue that you understood yourself as living somehow in the future. Ahead of myself, is how you put it once, 21 years ahead. Second, I argue that this is a trans way of occupying time, living out the future in the present tense, embodying for others, for yourself, Ernst Bloch's not yet. It's easy to idealize, being imbued with the sheen of futurity, endless becoming, longing that propels us, etc. But it's terrible, you know. Or it is also terrible. People take up all kinds of postures toward the future. Hope is one. Dread. Militarized fear. I write, if all goes well, to find out what I do not know. Dear Polly, before the war, you had been in love. Not just, that is, experiencing the feeling of love, but held inside of it. Held and then no longer held because love could not see you as you were, a man you tried for over a decade to become. Sex was a scene of your impossibility. People interpret this in all kinds of ways. False consciousness, schizophrenia, ego-dystonic lesbianism, transsexuality, the disease of reading, and sure, me too. In a prior scene, I am 13. I've just finished a novel, Middlesex. I am crouching on the blue carpet in my blue room. I am straining to sense how I might, too, have secreted inside the capacity to change. Dear Polly, about you, it was once reported that your errands were carefully planned so that you could travel in a circle, not wasting time. In the essay, I argue that, although by the late 1960s or so, you had fallen out of the future, taken up residence in the past-present tense, come to feel history more and more as a series of closed loops, we can sense, nonetheless, in your poems, your photographs, your strained sentences, your trans life preserved in the aesthetic, your still latent futures given form. Dear Polly, in 2011, in California, I rode my bicycle for miles to the office of a doctor whose name I do not any longer know. He gave me what you, nearly a century ago, had wanted with a kind of fervor I can never muster. I'm not saying it was easy. There had been psychologists and letters and prior attempts and protracted conflict and years and furtive transit and paperwork and endless deadening talk, but it was possible. Dear Polly, I encounter a thought that breaks a little more my heart. You say finally that race and sex are biologically permanent. You grow from a child to an adult, an alien may become a citizen, and so on, but where you have a permanent characteristic, It is on the basis of one's birth that one becomes a member of that caste. It is completely imposed upon one, and there is no way that one can escape. I don't know when this thought, the finality of it, seized you. Was it your admiration of Mary Daly, her writing, her beautiful tan? Was it that you could no longer bear hope's disappointment? Was it that you were, in some important way, already dead? All I know is that by the end of your life, having discovered no other way, you had become convinced that race, that sex, were closed forms. Polly, listen. They aren't. It isn't. Dear Polly, if you were alive now, I suspect I wouldn't so admire you. Lawyer, priest, National Organization of Women acquainted with the president's wife. But because you are dead, I do. Of course, if you were alive now, you wouldn't be in every important way you. I spend my whole life trying to convince my students of this. Our categories have histories, I say, gesturing wildly with my little nub of chalk. There, at work, I use words like contingency, discursive formations, rupture, and yet, today, walking with F around our Massachusetts town, I insist, as always, on a circular route. Coffee, then groceries, then flowers, for its tender efficiency. Oh, Polly, how can I help it? The first, the beautiful thought. You. Dear Polly, I have been wasting time. Doom is, among other things, why I'm here, trying to speak to you. Dear Polly, I guess the truth is that I am not brave, do not want to be brave. I want my classes, my students, my domestic poems. I want to move in small circles. I want 20 minutes in the morning, the blue couch, my blue room. Dear Polly, across the country, across the Senates and House chambers and governors' desks and Twitter feeds and liberal papers, someday as busy legislating sex, race, the people, the human, etc., as closed forms. They are busy, that is, making life impossible always in the name of life. I can offer endless impersonal explanations, but I feel at first as numb hand, clenched thought, bird in the throat. What was it you said? Race is the atmosphere we breathe from day to day, the pervasive irritant, the chronic allergy, the vague apprehension that makes one, uncomfortable, jumpy. Dear Polly, even now, I can't say what I mean. Dear Polly, I am writing to you because I cannot write. Everywhere there is language, enumerations of the problem, diagnoses, the problem beginning as far back as I can imagine, farther still. In class, I pace with my chalk. I circle the room, the words, e.g. neoliberalism, biopolitics, coloniality, modernity, the nuclear family form, and so on, draw desperate, crooked lines. I say and say and say, and what for? Increasingly, I think, there's only one word that might matter. No. Dear Polly, the more I look at you, the more I am overcome with an eerie feeling, a visceral near identification that seems, against my better judgment, that it might rescue me. I have become frankly fixated on this image of you. You who were prolific amidst Jim Crow, the fascist American mid-century, the Great Depression, your endless dislocation in pursuit of meaningful work, the atmosphere of anti-blackness, the deathly race-gender politics of the university, your loneliness, your unruly mind, the thwarting of your trans desire during a tipping point when sex change was heralded as newly possible, fixated on the question simply of how you thought under these conditions, how you endured the present tense. Dear Polly, no. No, 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 no. Dear Polly, I am standing before a crowd of people I admire, talking incoherently about you, my pursuit of you. What everyone will remember is that I am lonely, or that I have formal questions about loneliness, about whether it is a feeling that produces continuity, a desire for continuity, where there might more ethically be rupture. All day, they come up to report that they like what I said about loneliness, which makes me suspicious. Am I lonely? Am I lonely? My days are crowded with other people. Dear Polly, I look for as long as I can stand at one particular image. You as young man, you as Pete, you as self-proclaimed vagabond in a leather coat. I go tender for this image. You are young, little brother, so young. This is before Bellevue and arrest home, before the arrests and the intake forms in your desperate lines, before you spread beneath the knife in search of hidden organs, before the first end of love, before you are refused and refused and refused and made, I can't help but think, into the bravest thing, black girl, black woman. Once, after a talk, someone asked if I thought the name, your name, Pete, was a biblical reference. Peter, Paul, etc. Honestly, it hadn't occurred to me. Dear Polly, as far as I know, there is no tense, not in English, to describe the shape of time you help me see. The was will be, the salted circle, the still not yet. Dear Polly, your name for her, your first great love, was Pan, Pete and Pan, the boy who would not grow up. The boy who returns and returns to the same house, the same window, though nothing ever is the same. Polly, the truth is, after all this time, I want him simply to have lived. I think this means, shamefully, inconceivably, I want to live, to have lived. And though no word was uttered above the tumult of advancing tide, you came uncalled and placed your hand in mine.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. You're allowed to clap. You can do whatever you want to. Thank you. Cool. Yeah. I'm just going to read two more little ones, and then you can stop being inside my little feelings. Yeah, I'll read maybe this one that James mentioned in their intro, if I can find it in my little packet. Yeah, this one, whose title I've stolen from Emily Dickinson. My life closed twice. Liz, I think her name was, the woman my mother brought me to. We played cards in her perfumed office, lavender, tulips, bowl of waxed fruit. I was 10 and wanted to die. I don't know why I'm here again. I lived, obviously, I lived. When I was older, but still a child, not innocent, but foolish, I looked up from my solitary suffering. I learned the history of men. I pointed to a spot on the map they rendered. I said then, built my common life in a room, the end. If it's true, what they say, that poetry is written with the knowledge of and against death, that it is a beacon, a bulwark, then love, I confess, I have been no poet. Outside, a hawk circles overhead. 4 cops circle a woman dressed all in red. I circle the apartment as you sleep, happily, in the next room. Just this once, I want so desperately to be proven wrong. Okay. And eventually I'll break the habit, but I think that for the last 7 years, I've been ending my readings with the last poem in Dispatch, which is a cento, which means that it's a poem composed entirely of language that I had thieved from other poets. And in this case, I've stolen language entirely from people who are either my friends, or I think they're my friends, regardless of what they think, or they're Lucille Clifton, who is a friend of my mind. Yeah. Cento between the ending and the end. Sometimes you don't die when you're supposed to, and now I have a choice. Repair a world or build a new one. Inside my body, a white door opens into a place queerly brimming gold light. So velvet gold, it is like the world hasn't happened. When I call out, all my friends are there. Everyone we love is still alive, gathered at the lakeside like constellations. My honeyed kin, honeyed light beneath the sky, a garden, blue stalks, white buzz, the moon's marble glow, the fire, distant and flickering, the body whole, bright-winged, brimming with the hours of the day, beautiful, nameless planet. Oh, friends, my friends, bloom how you must, wild, until we are free. Thank you.
Thank you again, Cameron. Can we clap for you again? Is that okay? There are times that like poetry readings feel like kind of like sacrosanct and also academic conferences, and those are the best ones. So thank you for the gift that you just gave us. That was really lovely. So now I invite you all to buy Cameron's book. We also have a broadside commemorating his visit to Washington College, so that's also for sale, and there's a bundle if you want both. It's a pretty good savings, I think. Not to be too much of a capitalist. Anyway, and then to please avail yourself of food and drink. You must be hungry. I can sense how hungry you are. Please be hungry and take away. Our next event in the Living Writers series will be October 1st and 2nd, when Carl Phillips will talk October 1st about Sylvia Plath, and he has thoughts. And some of them are really spicy, so that'll be really great. That'll be here at the Lit House October 1st at 6 p.m. And then he'll read in Hotchkiss at the Gibson Center at 7 p.m. on October 2nd. So thank you again for coming. Have a good rest of your night.